On the north side of Haunted Hall is a drainage pipe. At the very base of that large drainage pipe is a relatively nonchalant plant. This, of course, is the liverwort. The liverwort is a very simple plant. It has a simple cuticle which is preventing it from losing a lot of water to the air. This plant thrives in moist locations. It does not have true stomata, but rather takes in carbon dioxide and lets out oxygen through small holes known as simple stoma. It is a non-vascular plant, thus it lacks leaves and lacks roots. It reproduces with spores, and it is a multicellular plant, even though it is a relatively small one. It does not have the vasculature effect known as vessel elements. What they do have, though, is they have little rhizines which allow them to attach to the substrate, and they have these small things known as gemmicups in which they can reproduce asexually, letting other smaller plants kind of come off in the rain so that they can reproduce and colonize new areas. Here, in a delicate sunbeam, is some moss. Moss is this relatively low-lying plant that seems to accumulate on anything that is not a rolling stone. Its little fronds here are covered by a cuticle. Now, these are not true leaves. They do not have true stomata, and this plant is not vascular. It doesn't have leaves or roots, but what it does have are these fronds reaching up to the sky and these little stick-like things that you can see coming off the top of here. The things that are actually encased in spiderweb are the diploid parts of the plant that are actually able to release the spores. So this is where the spores are actually going to be coming off, and that's how it's going to reproduce, is by releasing haploid spores into the wind. That's why it raises these things up pretty high here, as you can see with this pointing at the stick. That's the diploid part of the plant. The rest of the plant is haploid. So it doesn't have vessel elements, but this is a multicellular plant. So what you can also see is if we scoot this over here, you can see some of these younger diploid parts of the plant that are growing up towards the sky in the spider webs and in the sunbeams. Wave your fronds in the air if you love living in the forest subcanopy. That's right. All these ferns around here, these are plants that really enjoy the forest subcanopy. So these are Polystichum unitum. This is the western sword fern. And these plants, they have leaves, real true leaves, real raised up leaves, and real leaves that deer do not like to eat. They've got a thick cuticle, kind of a waxy coating on them, and that's going to prevent them from desiccating during the summer, so they don't want to dry out. They do have stomata underneath these, on the bottom of these leaves, and these are some really nice examples of leaves. If this was during the summer, we could also look at some of the local bracken, which has these huge 2-meter tall leaves. So these do not have vessel elements in them. They do have true roots, though, so as far as their vasculature goes, there you are. And they've got spores. They reproduce by spores. You can actually look at the bottom of these leaves. You can see these brown things, and those are going to release this powder. These are spores, and the spores are haploid, which are going to give rise to the next generation. Of course, these are multicellular, and these are diploid plants. A good tip is that anything that has true leaves is a diploid part of the plant. Perhaps the least difficult plants to find here on St. Martin's campus are the gymnosperms, literally surrounded by these wonderful Douglas firs out here, and they are just practically dropping biology down on us. So here we have a Douglas fir branch. Each one of these true leaves, which are what we would call needles, have a cuticle and have stomata. The stomata are especially adapted to dry conditions by being in little sunken pits. So as I mentioned, they have true leaves, they have true roots, which go all around this area and interact with fungi. Rather than produce spores, they produce seeds on these distinct cones right there. They are truly vascular plants. They are, of course, not only multicellular, but they are gigantic. Although they lack vessel elements, they have these huge trunks going straight up to the sky. Huge plants, absolutely glorious and beautiful to look at. We also have a good example here of what is not a plant, but are lichens covering these. So these plants make homes for a whole bunch of other non-plant things such as fungi, which will be covered in a later lab. January may seem an odd time to be looking for flowering plants, but even in the depths of winter, we can find daisies here on St. Martin's campus. These flowering plants have a cuticle along their leaves, which are true leaves. They have stomata on their leaves, which allows them to take in oxygen and let out take in carbon dioxide and let out oxygen. These are vascular plants, as you can see this nice vasculature here, which has vessel elements going up to the flower, which is a true flower. So it produces gametes in the form of pollen. And this plant is multicellular. So this is one of these flowering plants that is capable of growing even in the midst of winter and producing beautiful blooms even in January.